All right. Well, now we found the surface or surface area of sort of the flat circular part of the washer. And we've done that for both the front and the back. We've taken into consideration the hole in the middle of it. So that part is done. Now what we need to think about is how about this sort of outer wall of the washer, and then we'll move on to the inner wall of the washer. So in order to think about this part, we need to think about what shape this is, right? And this is where, if we go back to our cylinder diagram, when we sort of pulled apart that cylinder, um, this is the part of the cylinder, right, that comes from the sort of the tall part of the cylinder or the wall. And this is the part where if we open this up, right, it makes sort of a big, long, skinny rectangle, right? You can think about this for yourself as well. If you picture something, if you don't have a fancy app to kind of unfold a cylinder for you, you can also just think about like what's a real world object or an everyday item that you're familiar with that kind of has the shape that we're looking at. And so, like, one of the things I like to think about is a soup can, right? So a soup can has a paper label on it usually, and it wraps around the can. And if you take that label and you cut it off, what you get is a long, skinny rectangle. Okay. And when you think about the size of that rectangle, one of the dimensions, kind of the shorter side, is going to be the same as the height of the can. Usually that label kind of goes from top to bottom or pretty close to from top to bottom. And so, that measurement will match up. Um, Now, that label is a rectangle, so we need to know the sort of the length and the width in order to be able to find its area. The tricky part is thinking about this length. How do we find what that is equal to? And what we need to remember is that we need to think about, like, where did that length come from, right? This distance right here. Well, that's the part of the label that wraps around the can. And if we think about, like, what do we call that measurement? When you find the distance around a circle, that's the circumference of that circle. And so what we need to find is, if we know the height of the can, we'll have the width. And if we can find the circumference of it, then we'll have the length. So we know the height of this washer. We're thinking of this as sort of similar to a can. This height, or this thickness, is 3 millimeters. So that's going to be the width of our sort of long, skinny rectangle. And we can almost imagine if this washer had like a paper label wrapping around it that we could cut off, what we would get would be this really long, skinny rectangle, and it would be 3 millimeters on the one side. The other side would be the circumference of the circle, and the way that we find circumference is pi times the diameter. So in this case, that would be 3.14 times, the big circle has a diameter of 22. Okay, so that's our next calculation, and you'll do that on the next screen.